The gunshot shattered the evening calm of Winnemucca, Nevada, in 1876, sending Sophia Keller scrambling for cover behind the heavy oak counter of her father's apothecary shop. A second shot followed, then the unmistakable sound of a body collapsing on her porch. The town had seen its share of violence since the Central Pacific Railroad had put it on the map, but never this close to her doorstep, never with blood seeping under her door. Sophia's hands trembled as she reached for the shotgun her father insisted she keep nearby. At 23, she had never fired it at anything more threatening than a rattlesnake, but the world beyond her door had grown increasingly dangerous. Since her father's death 6 months ago, she had managed the apothecary alone, using the medical knowledge he'd passed down to her despite the townsfolk's skepticism about a woman healer. "Hello," she called out cautiously, moving toward the door. "Is anyone there?" A pained groan answered her. Setting the shotgun aside but within reach, Sophia cautiously opened the door. Sprawled on her porch lay a man she'd never seen before, blood soaking through his shirt just below his left shoulder. His hat had fallen beside him, revealing sandy hair streaked with dust and sweat. His eyes, sharp blue despite the pain clouding them, locked onto hers. "Mighty sorry to trouble you, madam," he managed, his voice strained but clear. "Seems I've picked up an unwanted souvenir." Sophia glanced down the street, seeing no sign of his attackers. "Can you walk?" she asked, already assessing the wound with a practiced eye. "I need to get you inside." The stranger nodded, grimacing as he pushed himself up with his good arm. "Xavier Jameson," he said through gritted teeth as she helped him inside. "Most folks just call me Zav." "I'm Sophia Keller," she replied, locking the door behind them. "And you, Mr. Jameson, have been shot." "Reckon that's true enough." His attempt at a smile faltered as she guided him to a chair behind the counter. "What brings you to Winnemucca with bullets following you?" Sophia asked, gathering supplies from the shelves: alcohol, bandages, her surgical kit. "We don't take kindly to trouble here." "I bring mail, not trouble," he answered, wincing as she helped him remove his bloodied shirt. "I'm riding for the Pony Express out of Carson City." "Was carrying bank documents when 3 men decided they wanted them more than I did." Sophia paused, scissors in hand. "The Pony Express closed years ago." Despite his pain, a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "Not officially, no. But there's still need for fast riders carrying things too valuable for the regular mail. Less stations now, more dangerous stretches." She nodded, focusing on the wound. The bullet had passed through muscle, missing bone by mere inches. "You're fortunate," she said, cleaning around the entry wound. "A little higher and we'd be having a very different conversation." Xavier hissed as the alcohol touched raw flesh. "Doesn't feel particularly fortunate at the moment." "Trust me, Mr. Jameson, I've seen what happens when luck runs out," she replied, her voice suddenly distant. Images of her father's final days flashed before her consumption had taken him slowly, painfully. She'd tried everything in her power to save him, but some wounds were beyond healing. As Sophia worked, extracting fragments of shirt from the wound and preparing to disinfect it thoroughly, Xavier studied her face. She was young to have such skilled hands, yet her movements held the confidence of experience. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, a few escaped tendrils framing a face that carried both beauty and sorrow. "You're mighty young to be running an apothecary alone," he observed. "And you're mighty talkative for a man who's been shot," she countered, though without malice. "I've been helping my father since I was 12. Medicine has always made sense to me, even when little else did." As she worked, removing bullet fragments with tweezers, Xavier bit down on the leather strap she'd given him, but never once complained. She admired his fortitude. Most men she'd treated made considerably more fuss over far less. "The bullet fragmented," she explained. "I need to ensure I get every piece out before infection sets in." Xavier nodded, his face pale but composed. "Do what you need to, I trust those hands." The statement caught her off guard. Trust wasn't something freely given in these parts, especially not to a woman doctor many considered unqualified despite her skills. Once she had cleaned and stitched the wound, Sophia prepared a tea of willow bark and meadowsweet. "For the pain," she explained, pressing the steaming cup into his hand. You'll need to rest here tonight. I can't have you reopening those stitches." "I'm obliged," Xavier said, sipping the bitter brew without complaint. "But those men might come looking. I shouldn't bring that danger to your door." "Those documents you were carrying, did they get them?" He shook his head. "Hidden in my boot, they only got an empty satchel." Sophia considered this. "Then they'll be long gone by now, thinking they've been duped, or they'll be back madder than before," Xavier countered. "Either way, you're in no condition to ride, and I'm not about to send you out to bleed to death over some bank papers," she said with finality, standing to prepare a pallet in the back room. "We'll sort it out in the morning." As night fell over Winnemucca, Sophia checked on her patient several times. Each time she found him awake, alert despite the pain and blood loss. There was something compelling about Xavier Jameson, a straightforwardness in his gaze that suggested he was exactly who he claimed to be, no more, no less. In a frontier town where everyone seemed to be running toward something or away from something else, such honesty was uncommon. "You should rest too," he said during her midnight check. "I promise not to die or escape before morning." Sophia smiled despite herself. "I've learned to sleep lightly, Mr. Jameson. Comes with the territory." "Xav," he corrected. "If you're going to save my life and let me bleed all over your floor, you might as well use my name." "Xav, then," she agreed, turning down the lamp. "Sleep if you can. Morning comes early in Nevada." Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the dusty windows of the apothecary. Sophia had dozed in fits, her mind returning repeatedly to the injured stranger in her back room. She found him sitting up when she entered, his color significantly improved. "You look better," she observed, placing a hand on his forehead to check for fever. His skin felt normal, which was a good sign. "Feel it too," he replied. "Your medicines work wonders." "They work better when the patient follows instructions," she said pointedly. "You shouldn't be sitting up yet." Xavier grimaced as he shifted position. "Never been much good at lying still." "Besides, I need to get those documents delivered." Sophia crossed her arms. "Not today, you don't. That wound needs at least 3 days before you even think about riding." 3 days. He looked genuinely distressed. "Miss Keller, I appreciate your care, but I have obligations." "And I have an obligation to my patients," she countered firmly. 3 days minimum, or you'll tear those stitches and find yourself right back where you started if you're lucky. If you're not, you'll develop an infection that could cost you that arm or worse." Their standoff was interrupted by a sharp knock at the front door. Sophia tensed, remembering Xavier's pursuers. "Stay here," she whispered, reaching for the shotgun. "Sophia, you in there, girl?" called a familiar voice. "Got some folks asking after that stranger that rode in yesterday." "Sheriff Tom Reeves." Sophia exhaled with relief, then glanced at Xavier, who nodded his permission. "Coming, Sheriff," she called, setting the shotgun aside and moving to the front door. Sheriff Reeves stood on her porch, flanked by 2 men in suits who looked distinctly out of place in dusty Winnemucca. "Morning, Sophia," the sheriff said, touching the brim of his hat. "These gentlemen are from the Nevada Banking Association, say they're looking for a courier." "Mr. Jameson is here," she confirmed. "He was shot last night. I've treated his wound, but he's in no condition to travel." The taller of the 2 bankers stepped forward. "We need to verify he still has the documents, Miss Keller. They're extremely important." "You can verify all you want," she replied, standing firm in the doorway, "but he stays put for at least 3 days. Doctor's orders." The banker looked like he might argue, but Sheriff Reeves cleared his throat meaningfully. "Sophia here's the best medical mind in 3 counties," he said. "If she says 3 days, it's 3 days." Sophia led them to the back room where Xavier had managed to stand, leaning heavily against the wall. He extracted a waterproof packet from his boot and handed it to the bankers, who examined the seals carefully before nodding with satisfaction. "Seems everything's in order, Mr. Jameson," the banker said. "We can arrange to have another courier pick up the packet." Xavier shook his head. "I took this job, I'll finish it. Just need a few days to mend, as the lady says." After some negotiation, the bankers agreed to return in 3 days. As they departed with the sheriff, Sophia turned to Xavier with exasperation. "You shouldn't be standing," she scolded, helping him back to the pallet. "Couldn't very well meet bank representatives flat on my back," he replied, then added more seriously, "Thank you, Sophia." Not everyone would take in a stranger with a bullet wound. "I'm a healer," she said simply. "That's what we do." Over the next 3 days, Xavier proved to be both an engaging and frustrating patient. He followed her medical instructions carefully but couldn't abide staying completely still. By the second day, he insisted on helping around the shop, sitting on a stool behind the counter while she filled prescriptions and advised customers. "You're good with them," he observed after she had patiently explained a complex dosage to an elderly rancher. "They trust you." "Not all of them," Sophia replied, thinking of the families who still rode an extra day to see the male doctor in Battle Mountain. "Some still believe women shouldn't practice medicine." "Their loss," Xavier said with a shrug that made him wince as it pulled his stitches. "Way I see it, skilled hands are skilled hands, doesn't matter who they belong to." His easy acceptance warmed something in Sophia that had grown cold since her father's death. Most men in Winnemucca tolerated her at best, viewing her as an oddity too educated to be a proper wife, too female to be a proper doctor. On the evening of the second day, as they shared a simple supper of stew and biscuits, Xavier asked about her past. "Were you born here in Winnemucca?" Sophia shook her head. "We came from Philadelphia when I was 10. My father was a trained physician, but after my mother died, he couldn't bear the city anymore. He heard the frontier needed doctors, so we came west." "And he taught you everything he knew," Xavier guessed. "He tried," she said, a sad smile playing at her lips. "I was his only child, and he said my mind was too sharp to waste on just keeping house. Not everyone approved." "What happened to him?" Xavier asked gently. Sophia stared into her stew, the pain still fresh. "Consumption, 6 months ago." "I did everything I could, tried every treatment, but some things can't be fixed," Xavier finished for her, understanding in his eyes. She nodded, grateful he didn't offer empty platitudes. "The bank holds the mortgage on this place. I have until the end of the year to prove I can make it profitable, or they'll sell it. Most folks think I should just marry and be done with it." "And what do you think?" Sophia looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I think I'm a healer. It's not just what I do, it's who I am." "I can't abandon that," Xavier nodded slowly. "Some callings run deeper than blood," he said, and something in his tone made her wonder what calling drove him to ride dangerous routes alone. On the morning of the third day, Sophia checked his wound and found it healing well with no signs of infection. "You've been fortunate," she said, applying a fresh bandage, "and you heal quickly." "Good living," he joked, though they both knew riding for days through hostile territory hardly qualified as such. "The bankers will be back tomorrow," she reminded him, aware of a strange reluctance at the thought of his departure. In just 3 days, Xavier Jameson had become a comfortable presence in her previously solitary life. "About that," he said, catching her hand as she finished tying off the bandage. "I've been thinking. My route takes me back through Winnemucca in about 2 weeks. I'll need someone to check these stitches, make sure everything's healing proper." Sophia smiled despite herself. "Is that so? I suppose I could make time in my schedule." "Appreciate it," he replied, his eyes holding hers a moment longer than necessary. "Professional interest only, of course." "Of course," she echoed, aware of the warmth in her cheeks. That evening, as they sat on the small porch behind the apothecary watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Xavier told her more about his life. Born in Missouri, he'd headed west after the war, too restless to settle in one place but determined to make an honest living. "Riding suited me," he explained. "Open sky, different towns, carrying things that matter to people who need them. Isn't it lonely?" Sophia asked, thinking of her own isolation in a town full of people who saw her as an outsider. Xavier considered this. "There's different kinds of lonely," he said finally. "Out on the trail, I'm alone but not lonely, if that makes sense. It's when I'm in towns full of people with nowhere to belong that the loneliness hits hardest." Sophia understood perfectly. "That's how it's been since Father died. I'm surrounded by people I've known for years, yet I've never felt more alone." As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, talking about books they'd read, places they'd seen or hoped to see. Sophia found herself laughing more than she had in months, while Xavier seemed to drink in her words as if they were water after a long drought. When they finally retired for the night, Sophia to her small bedroom and Xavier to his pallet in the back room, she found herself wishing the bankers wouldn't come the next day. Foolish thoughts, she chided herself. Xavier Jameson was a wanderer by nature, and she was bound to Winnemucca by duty and necessity. Morning brought the bankers as expected, accompanied this time by a third man, a marshal from Carson City. Xavier presented the documents, now fully sealed in their protective covering, and received payment for his trouble. "You're cleared to continue your route, Jameson," the marshal said, handing him additional papers. "We've got new dispatches that need delivery to Elko." Xavier glanced at Sophia before nodding his acceptance. "I'll head out this afternoon." After the officials departed, Sophia busied herself preparing supplies for his journey: clean bandages, salve for his wound, willow bark for pain. Her movements were brisk, professional, betraying nothing of the hollowness growing inside her. "You should change the dressing daily," she instructed, not quite meeting his eyes as she handed him the packet. "And no heroics. If the wound opens or shows any sign of infection, find a doctor immediately." "I will," he promised, accepting the supplies. His hand lingered on hers briefly. "Sophia, you should prepare your horse," she said quickly, withdrawing her hand. "It's a long ride to Elko." Xavier nodded, something like disappointment flickering in his eyes. "Right, I'll get my things." As he gathered his meager possessions and saddled his horse outside, Sophia stood in the doorway of the apothecary, arms crossed tightly across her chest as if holding herself together. She had known from the start that he would leave men like Xavier always did, yet the prospect now felt unbearable. When he was ready, Xavier approached her one last time. "What do I owe you for your care?" he asked formally. "Nothing," she replied. "Consider it my contribution to the Nevada Banking Association." A smile touched his lips. "Mighty generous, still I'd like to repay you somehow." "Come back in one piece," she said before she could stop herself. "For those stitches to be checked." Xavier's smile broadened. "Yes, madam." "Doctor's orders." He mounted his horse with a slight grimace, his wound still tender. "2 weeks," he said, tipping his hat. "You have my word." Sophia watched him ride east until dust obscured his figure, then turned back to her empty shop, the silence suddenly oppressive after 3 days of his company. The following 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. Sophia threw herself into her work, taking inventory, preparing remedies, even riding out to nearby ranches to treat patients who couldn't come to town. At night, she found herself remembering conversations with Xavier, wondering where he was, whether his wound was healing properly. "You're mooning over that courier," observed Martha Bridges, the widow who ran the general store and one of the few townsfolk who treated Sophia as an equal. "Can't say I blame you. Handsome fellow, and he looked at you like you hung the moon." "He was a patient," Sophia protested, selecting coffee beans from Martha's stock. Martha hummed skeptically. "And I'm Queen Victoria. Mark my words, that man will be back." 13 days after Xavier's departure, Sophia was restocking her shelves when Sheriff Reeves burst through the door, his expression grave. "Sophia, we need you at the jail. Got a badly injured man just brought in." Her heart lurched painfully. "Who is it?" "One of the Henderson boys found him on the trail from Elko. Beaten something awful. Says his name's Jameson." Sophia grabbed her medical bag without hesitation, following the sheriff at her run. At the jailhouse, deputies had laid Xavier on a cot in one of the cells. His face was barely recognizable beneath bruises and dried blood, and his breathing came in labored gasps. "Xavier," she called, kneeling beside him. His eyes fluttered open at her voice. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "knew you'd be here." "Don't talk," she instructed, already examining his injuries. Multiple broken ribs, possible internal bleeding, severe contusions across his torso and face. Far worse than the bullet wound she'd treated before. "Sheriff, I need to get him to my shop. I need light and proper supplies." With the help of 2 deputies, they carefully transported Xavier to the apothecary. Once there, Sophia worked methodically, cleaning wounds, binding ribs, checking for signs of internal damage. All the while, she maintained a calm exterior that belied the fear churning inside her. Who did this? she asked when he was finally stabilized enough to speak. Xavier winced as he shifted on the bed they'd made for him. Ambush. 3 men waiting on the trail back said I'd taken something that belonged to them. The bank documents. He shook his head slightly, then stopped as pain lanced through him. No, earlier job, they thought I still had it. Did you? A ghost of a smile touched his swollen lips. No, delivered weeks ago, tried to tell them. Clearly they didn't believe you, Sophia said, anger rising at the men who'd done this. Did you recognize them? One, Xavier admitted. Runs with the Carson City gang, thief named Decker, sheriff knows him. Sophia nodded, filing away the information. You need to rest now. No arguments this time. For once, Xavier didn't protest. His injuries were far more severe than the bullet wound, and recovery would take weeks, not days. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, Sophia sat beside him, monitoring his breathing, prepared to act if his condition worsened. The next few days blurred together as Sophia divided her time between tending to Xavier and maintaining her regular patients. Sheriff Reeves sent deputies after the men Xavier had identified, but they had a significant head start. 5 days after his return to Winnemucca, Xavier's fever broke and his breathing became less labored. Sophia allowed herself to hope for the first time since they'd brought him in. You're still here, he murmured when he woke to find her replacing the compress on his forehead. Where else would I be? She replied, relief evident in her voice. This is my shop after all. Could've put me anywhere else, wouldn't have blamed you. Sophia shook her head. That's not how this works, Xavier. I don't abandon patients halfway through treatment. His hand found hers, his grip weak but purposeful. Not just a patient, Sophia. The words hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Before she could respond, fatigue claimed him again, and he slipped back into sleep, leaving her to wonder if he'd meant what she thought he did. As the days passed, Xavier grew stronger. 2 weeks after his return, he was able to sit up for extended periods, and the worst of his bruises had faded to yellowish green. Sophia still insisted he remain at the apothecary, converting her storeroom into a small bedroom for him. You're hovering, he complained good-naturedly one afternoon as she checked his ribs. I'm not going to break if you turn your back. Evidence suggests otherwise, she countered, but there was no edge to her words. Having him there, even injured, had filled a void in her life she hadn't fully acknowledged before. One evening as they shared supper, Xavier broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. I can't stay here forever, Sophia. She set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. I know that. But I can't go back to courier work either, he continued. Not after this. I'm not as young as I was, and these bones won't take another beating like that. What will you do? She asked, fearing his answer would take him far from Winnemucca, far from her. Xavier met her gaze steadily. That depends largely on you, on me. Sophia's heart quickened. I've been thinking, he said carefully. This town needs a proper doctor, not just for emergencies, but for everyday care. You have the knowledge, but you're stretched too thin trying to run this place alone. What are you suggesting? A partnership, he said simply. I've saved most of what I've earned over the years, enough to pay off the mortgage on this place with some left over to expand, make it a proper medical office with an apothecary attached. Sophia stared at him, speechless. I know something about business, Xavier continued. Learned that before I took to writing. I could handle the accounts, ordering supplies, even help with preparing medicines once you showed me how, free you up to focus on the doctoring part. Why would you do that? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier's expression softened. Because in all my years of wandering, I've never met anyone like you, Sophia Keller. Because when I was lying half dead on that trail, your face was what I saw, your shop was where I wanted to be. Because for the first time in my life, I want to stay somewhere with someone. Tears pricked at Sophia's eyes. You hardly know me. I know enough, he replied simply. I know you're brilliant and stubborn and kinder than this world deserves. I know you saved my life twice now. I know I love the sound of your voice and the way you see through people's hurts to what they really need. That's not love, she protested weakly. That's gratitude. Xavier shook his head. Been grateful to plenty of people in my time, never wanted to build a life with any of them. The word life hung between them, heavy with possibility. I'm not asking for promises right now, he added when she remained silent. Just a chance to prove this could work the business and the rest of it. Sophia looked around the apothecary, the shelves her father had built, the counter where she'd treated Xavier's bullet wound, the small living space that had never felt so much like home as it did with him in it. "People will talk," she said finally. "A woman in business with a man who's not her husband." A smile tugged at Xavier's lips. "Then we'll have to remedy that particular issue, won't we? In time." Despite herself, Sophia felt an answering smile bloom. "Are you proposing a business arrangement or something else, Mr. Jameson?" "Both," he admitted, "though I'm willing to take them one at a time if that suits you better." Impulsively, Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would like to try this partnership of yours, the business part first and then we'll see about the rest." The joy that lit Xavier's face made her heart swell. "That's all I ask," he said, squeezing her hand. "A chance." Over the next month, as Xavier continued to heal, they began planning in earnest. Word spread through Winnemucca that the apothecary would be expanding into a proper medical office. To Sophia's surprise, the response was largely positive. Sheriff Reeves was particularly enthusiastic, having seen firsthand how valuable her skills were. "Town's growing," he told them one afternoon, stopping by to share news that the men who attacked Xavier had been captured near Carson City. "Railroad brings new folks every month. We need proper medical care, not just emergency patching up." Martha Bridges proved an unexpected ally, helping spread the word among the town's women that Sophia would be offering specialized care for female complaints, a service sorely lacking in the region. By the time winter arrived, bringing with it biting winds that swept across the Nevada plains, Xavier was fully recovered and their plans were taking shape. The mortgage had been paid off, construction had begun on an addition to the shop, and they had ordered new medical equipment from San Francisco. As Christmas approached, Sophia found herself reflecting on the remarkable turn her life had taken. Just 1 year earlier, she had been alone, grieving her father, facing the possibility of losing everything she cared about. Now she had a thriving business, a partner who believed in her abilities, and something she'd never expected to find in Winnemucca love. For Xavier had indeed proved to be more than a business partner. As they worked side by side, his admiration for her had grown evident to everyone in town. He treated her as an equal, deferring to her medical expertise while contributing his own skills in organization and negotiation. The wounds of his attack had healed, leaving only faint scars to mark what might have been the end of his journey. On Christmas Eve, after closing the shop early, Xavier led Sophia to the newly completed addition, a proper examination room with large windows to provide natural light. "I have something for you," he said, presenting her with a small wooden box. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a caduceus, the symbol of medicine. "It was my mother's," Xavier explained as he fastened it around her neck. "She always believed healing was a sacred calling." "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, touching the pendant. "Thank you." "There's something else," he said, suddenly looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold ring. "I know we agreed to take things slowly, but I've never been known for my patience." Sophia's breath caught as he dropped to one knee before her. "Sophia Keller, you healed more than just my wounds. You gave me a reason to stop wandering, a place to belong. I love you more than I thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Sophia's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she managed, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I will." Xavier slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into a gentle embrace. As their lips met in a tender kiss, Sophia knew she had found something rare, someone who saw her completely, who valued her mind and her calling as much as her heart. Spring brought their wedding, a simple ceremony in the town's small church. Martha Bridges stood as Sophia's witness, while Sheriff Reeves stood for Xavier. To Sophia's amazement, the church was filled with townsfolk, many of whom had been her patients over the years. "Seems you've won them over after all," Xavier whispered as they faced the gathering. "We did," she corrected, squeezing his hand. They exchanged vows beneath a spray of wildflowers gathered from the surrounding hills. Xavier's promise to cherish and support her in healing and in all pursuits brought fresh tears to Sophia's eyes. This was a partnership in every sense, one built on respect, admiration, and deep love. The newly renamed Jameson Medical Office and Apothecary flourished as Winnemucca continued to grow. Xavier's business acumen combined with Sophia's medical knowledge proved an unbeatable combination. By the following year, they had hired an assistant, a young woman named Emily, who showed the same aptitude for medicine that Sophia had demonstrated at her age. "You're training your replacement," Xavier teased one evening as they watched Emily carefully measuring ingredients for a tonic. "Expanding our reach," Sophia corrected. "There's more need than one doctor can meet." Life settled into a rhythm that satisfied them both. Xavier still occasionally rode out with urgent medicines for distant ranches, satisfying his need for open spaces without the dangers of his former occupation. Sophia divided her time between treating patients and researching new medical techniques, subscribing to journals from back east to keep her knowledge current. Their home above the shop became a warm haven, filled with books, medical specimens that fascinated them both, and eventually, the sounds of a son they named Thomas, after both Xavier's father and Sheriff Reeves, who had become a dear friend. When Thomas was 2, a severe influenza swept through Nevada, testing Sophia's skills and endurance as never before. For weeks, she worked tirelessly, moving from patient to patient while Xavier managed the apothecary and cared for their son. "You need to rest," he insisted one night, finding her asleep at her desk, medical texts open before her. "You can't help anyone if you collapse." "I can't stop," she murmured, barely conscious. "Too many need help." Xavier gathered her in his arms, carrying her to their bed despite her weak protests. "Rest for a few hours. I'll wake you if there's an emergency." As he tucked the blankets around her, Sophia caught his hand. "How do you always know what I need?" Xavier smiled, brushing hair from her forehead. "You healed my body, Sophia. Let me heal your soul when it needs it." The epidemic eventually passed, but not without losses that weighed heavily on Sophia's heart. Through it all, Xavier remained her steadfast support, never doubting her abilities even when she questioned them herself. "You can't save everyone," he reminded her gently after they lost elderly Mrs. Parker despite Sophia's best efforts. "But those who survived because of you far outnumber those we lost." By the time Thomas was 5, Winnemucca had grown enough to support a small hospital. When the town council approached Sophia about serving as its chief physician, Xavier was the first to encourage her acceptance. "It's what your father would have wanted," he said as she hesitated, concerned about balancing new responsibilities with family life. "And it's what you were born to do." "What about the apothecary?" she asked. "And Thomas?" Xavier laughed, pulling her close. "The apothecary will continue with Emily's help, and Thomas and I will manage just fine. He already knows more about herbs than most grown men." Their son had indeed inherited Sophia's fascination with medicine, often following her around the shop asking endless questions about remedies and treatments. "We're a family of healers," Xavier told him proudly. "Your mother with her medicines and me." He winked at Sophia. "I specialized in healing one very special doctor when she forgot to care for herself." On their 10th anniversary, Xavier surprised Sophia with a journey to San Francisco, her first trip beyond Nevada since arriving as a child. They visited medical colleges, botanical gardens, and the newly established women's hospital. "This could be Winnemucca someday," Xavier mused as they toured the facility. "Not as grand, perhaps, but with the same purpose, healing for all who need it." "You think too highly of me," Sophia protested, though she was deeply moved by his vision. "I think exactly as highly of you as you deserve," he countered, pulling her close as they looked out over the bay. "The frightened girl who took in a bleeding stranger has become the most respected healer in northern Nevada. And I'm still the luckiest man alive to be by your side." As they stood watching the sun set over the Pacific, Sophia reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a gunshot on her porch. Xavier had arrived wounded in body but with a spirit intact. She had been whole in body but wounded in soul, grieving and alone. Together they had found healing neither could have achieved alone. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. Sophia smiled up at him, love filling her heart. "I'm thinking about bullet wounds and broken hearts and how sometimes the most unexpected moments change everything. Like taking in a shot-up courier on a stormy night," he suggested, his eyes crinkling with familiar humor. "Exactly like that," she agreed, reaching up to touch his cheek. The scar from his bullet wound was barely visible now, just as the scars on her heart had faded to distant memories. "You rode into town looking for safety and found a home. I was looking for purpose and found love." "Best trade I ever made," Xavier whispered, bending to kiss her as the last rays of sunlight gilded the water. "My wandering for your loneliness." They returned to Winnemucca with renewed purpose, expanding the hospital to include a training program for nurses. When Thomas eventually left for medical school in Philadelphia, the city his grandfather had fled years before Sophia felt the completion of a circle. Her father's legacy would continue through her son, just as it lived on through her work. Their life together was not without challenges. Xavier suffered occasional pain from his old injuries, especially in the harsh Nevada winters. Sophia fought ongoing battles against those who still believed women shouldn't practice medicine. Yet through it all, they remained steadfast partners, their initial bargain a business arrangement and a chance at love having blossomed into something neither could have imagined on that fateful night. On the 20th anniversary of their meeting, the town of Winnemucca held a celebration honoring Sophia's contributions to the community's health. As she stood before the gathering, Xavier proudly at her side, she couldn't help but marvel at the path that had brought them there. "Medicine has been my calling," she told the assembled crowd, "but love has been my strength. We all need both to truly heal, skilled hands for our bodies and caring hearts for our souls." Her gaze found Xavier's in the crowd, and the love she saw there still took her breath away, even after all these years. He had kept his promise from long ago to heal the wounds no one could see, to support her calling while fulfilling his own. That night, as they walked home beneath a canopy of stars, Xavier took her hand just as he had countless times before. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if those men hadn't shot me?" he asked. "If I'd just delivered my package and ridden on?" Sophia considered this. "I think we would have found each other somehow," she said finally. "Some connections are too important to leave to chance." Xavier nodded, squeezing her hand. "I rode 1,000 trails before I found you. Sometimes I think every step was leading me to your door. And every patient I treated was preparing me to save the one who would save me," Sophia replied softly. As they reached their home, the expanded apothecary that had been the beginning of their shared story, Xavier pulled her into his arms, his kiss as tender as their first. "To bullet wounds and broken hearts," he whispered against her lips. "And the healing of both," Sophia completed, her heart full of gratitude for the wounded cowboy who had brought love to her door and meaning to her life. Together they stepped into their home, their hands intertwined as they had been from the moment a gunshot changed both their destinies on a quiet evening in Winnemucca so many years before.